Hello, and welcome to the Silicon Alley podcast. In today's episode, we'll be talking about risk, specifically the risk that every early stage entrepreneur faces, what it is, why it's important, and how you can use that risk to drive you to success as an early stage entrepreneur. Specifically, we'll be sitting down with Will Dorigo. He is the CEO and founder of Zublease, a platform that makes it super easy for college students to find as well as sublet their apartments. I'm William Lass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast, where it's my job to talk to VCs, entrepreneurs, and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business and give you actionable advice that you can apply in your own business. If you've not already, go ahead and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when episodes air every Friday. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy this risk-focused episode of the Silicon Alley podcast featuring the Will Dorigo.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this
Will, welcome to the Silicon Alley podcast. Super excited to have you on today.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, definitely. And first want to give a shout out to Aaron Frug, who is a mutual connection who actually set us up. So he's a fellow fintech founder, and want to give him a quick word for getting us connected.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you. If you're listening to this, shout out. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one thing that's really cool about this community of startups is that it's so giving, and there's so many people that want to see other people succeed. So I think that's a great way to kind of start our conversation is definitely give back, reach out to either of us, and you'll be amazed at the time that people will make to help you out.
I didn't know the startup community was that nice. So I'm very thankful. And, I always try to build up my connections and stuff. It's really awesome talking to these people, such as like Aaron and yourself. It's really interesting, and you guys give such awesome feedback. So it definitely helps,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Will, I want to start the conversation in an interesting place. I saw where you had posted about a month ago that you were a big skateboarder. And you kind of tied back some of the lessons that you learned from that as a kid, and that people may not necessarily know that about you that know you today. So can you talk to me a little bit about skating and how that's kind of impacted your entrepreneurial journey?
That's really funny because I feel like a lot of people don't know that about me, unless you knew me like early high school or middle school. And when I was in college, a lot of people, I studied a lot in college. I generally enjoyed like what I studied and stuff. So when I tell people that, they're like, "What, really?" But it's interesting. Yeah. I think it's funny. Like at that one day, I was just like, "I'm gonna write about this. Why not?" And it's true because I used to skateboard a lot. It was like my way of passing time, and I really enjoyed a lot about it. I would like film videos, I would video edit, and I would always come up with new tricks. And I think like definitely it's part of me today because when you skateboard, there's a lot of risk you take. You could get hurt, and there's a lot of creativity involved because like again, the world is your skate park. So you come up with the tricks and you see how you can make do and stuff. And we didn't have like fancy recording equipment, and I learned how like video edit, put together. They're not great or anything. And if you really look deep through YouTube, you might be able to find it. But definitely, it is part of me who I am today. And
Yeah.
I could probably still do a kickflip if I tried or not. It's been a while, but now if I like, and then in college, I would longboard to class, which, yeah, but it's interesting. It was really fun. I mean, my parents were really against skating because obviously like, I don't know, most parents don't want you to get hurt and stuff. And then again, being rebellious, most kids are rebellious, I feel like during that time. And, it's kind of, again, today it's like me, like taking risk, being a little rebellious, and, starting companies is not something like, it's not normal, there's a lot of risks to it. And, sometimes you have to create the rules, like there isn't really a guide to starting a company, or a rule book for it. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely there's plenty of people that will say this is the way to do it, but there's 1,000 flavors of that. And I think that's a great way to think about entrepreneurship. And it sounds like
Yeah.
something that you learned through skating is that you can kind of go out there and create your own tricks and how you want to kind of interact with the skateboard in the world and where you want to go. And your stairs that you're trying to grind down or jump down are going to be
Yeah.
different than someone else's that has done it. So you're always kind of adapting. And when you fall, you've got to get back up again. So
Yeah. Did you ever do like a sport, like, I don't want to get too off topic, but like, were you into any like sports like that, especially like things like skating or biking or I don't know, football?
So, I mean, I played soccer. I was a big soccer player growing up.
Oh, cool.
I did have one friend, Tom Fox, who was really into like, uh, this was like the first time that Razor scooters were cool. I think they were cool for a very
Yeah.
short time in like the 90s, maybe early 2000s. And then they got uncool for a really long time. And I feel like they've kind of come back a little bit, but yeah, we would like grind on the like curb and like do stuff like that. But he was always way more adventurous than I was. I was always like hesitant and would back out halfway through. Kind of what you talked about in your article of saying that you have to commit or else you really are going to hurt yourself. And that's something
Yeah.
that's definitely true when you think about like football or soccer, right? If you go in and kind of limp into a contact or something like that, you're more likely to get hurt than if you actually commit. So
Yeah.
it's a
There's a
great
lot of
analogy.
knowledge. There's a lot of analogies. Yeah. Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. So, well, talk to me about your kind of entrepreneurial lineage. So you alluded to it when you were talking about skating and that you come from a family of entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit about how your grandfather and your parents, and talk to me about how entrepreneurship has been a big part of your life from an early age?
Yeah, like I never thought much about it back then. Now after starting a company and everything, it's when I really started thinking about it. And yeah, like my grandfather started a barber shop when he was in Argentina. My family's from Argentina, by the way. And um yeah, he opened a barber shop, and the day before he went throughout the entire city leaving business cards like on the footsteps of doors. And the next day when he opened, the whole store was like, the line was huge, and like he was pretty much famous throughout the city, like his barber shop. And then my dad started working there, and so he learned how to cut hair. Like pretty much everyone in my family, like my parents know how to cut hair. I don't, but I might learn just because, like, why not? Like at this point, just to keep it going. But um, and so my dad went. He moved to Venezuela, and then from Venezuela he then moved to the United States, and he became a programmer. He eventually like started his own web development business, and it went okay. And now he opened a motorcycle dealership in Fort Lauderdale. Um, Shout out to that. But yeah, so like he like the family is just always very entrepreneurial. They like taking risks and starting new things. My dad loves motorcycles. He grew up with motorcycles. He grew up fixing them, and he sold a few while he was young. So he just kept doing it, and then he just officialized it and and opened the dealership. For me, again, like throughout high school, I would sell stickers. I even would pick up furniture and sell it, and sometimes fix it up. I bought and sold guitars, and so I had like a little, and I also bought and sold a few motorcycles. My dad taught me how to do that and how to fix a few. Nothing too crazy, but yeah, I've always been a bit entrepreneurial during college. Not too much. I mainly just focused on school. Thankfully, like I was fortunate enough to receive scholarships, and I didn't really have to worry too much about finances. Really, nonetheless, I was frugal, but still, like um, I didn't really need to make money at the time. And I think definitely, one day I just came up with the idea of Zublease, and I think like I just said, why not? And I decided to go for it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
So it's kind of been baked into what you've seen is grandparents, parents, building businesses, starting things, taking some of those risks. Was there anything in particular that you feel like you've learned from watching them that you've been able to apply to Zublease? And then I definitely want to get into the founding story of Zublease, but is there anything in particular that you've taken away from, watching them as you grew up?
Um, I mean, the most concrete skill is just learning how to sell. Um, but I don't know. I think it's more so like of the mentality. Like I think a lot of people just don't have like it's a weird mentality of building something and just selling it to people. And a lot of people just don't really have that mentality. It's kind of interesting. It's like, yeah, like honestly, starting a business isn't, it's just like a document that says you own this business. Like it's nothing like, it's not rocket science or anything. Sure, running a successful business is hard. And yes, but like, uh, it's just doing it. Like my parents were, doers. They just, they're like, they want to do this and they do it. They weren't really like, into corporate life or employees much. My dad did work, at a few companies and stuff, but it wasn't really for him. So I think I just grew up in a very like interesting household, to say the least. Like my family is definitely an odd bunch, and I love them to death, but they're definitely not the typical family. So
Fair
um,
enough. So
yeah.
talk to me about the founding story of Zublease. So how did you come up with the idea? Talk obviously what is Zublease, and then kind of talk about how you came up with the idea.
Uh, so Zublease is basically just an online platform for college students to sublease their apartments. I came up with the idea when about 2 years ago, it was summer and I had an internship and I needed to sublet an apartment just because I needed just a short-term lease. And I was like, how do I do this? So I started Googling stuff and I started looking around. And I was like, how do I find a sublet? Like, eventually I talked to my friends and they told me, well, pretty much everyone posts on Facebook. And I was like, what? Like, that's kind of weird. So I eventually found this Facebook group that, you had to be invited into. And, people just post their things on there and they message each other. And I thought that was kind of crazy because it just wasn't really suited for that. There's not really much security. A lot of things can be done under the table. And even then, like, it's just students just have a hard time subletting. And a lot of times, the person in the apartment has a really hard time trying to, get out of the lease. And a lot of students, they don't stay for the whole year. A lot of them move out early on. They want to study abroad. They need to do an internship, et cetera, et cetera. They have many reasons. Students move around a lot. So basically, and so I decided, why not I start something to change this? It could be so much better. Students really shouldn't have to worry about year-long leases and whether, or finding an apartment, so that's why I decided to build. And it's been 2 years now. When I started it, I talked to a few of my friends who then became my co-founders because I don't have a coding background. Yeah, I could code basic stuff, but nothing, building applications and things like that. So I eventually teamed up with a few of my friends, and the first one was like, yeah, let's do it. I love this idea. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a problem. I'm like, okay, cool. And I did like surveys too, just to get an idea. And my second co-founder, he's more the rational type. He was like, let me think about it, because obviously a startup is a lot of work and stuff. I think a week later he called me. He's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, awesome. you know, to like, and then we had Creamy, who's our chief of marketing. She joined like a year later because we suck at marketing. Like we were not really good at that stuff. And so she's really good at marketing and design. So so yeah, we've just been going. And then recently, Jamie, who's one of my first co-founders, he left, but that's because he wanted to pursue his passion in music. He was working a full-time job and doing Zublease and doing music. Like it was just too much. And for me, like I'm always like, follow your passion and stuff. I ended up leaving my job because I wanted to follow my passion. So, I totally get where he was coming from. So I'm really happy that he did that. So now it's just the three of us, me, Senthrin, and Creamy. Senthrin is chief of technology. He does all the code. I sometimes help with code too, but I let him focus on it mainly. And Creamy does design and marketing.
Nice.
So
Yeah. So you experienced this problem yourself, and then it sounds like did a survey, kind of pursued it further to confirm there was a problem. So what was it like in the early days when you were first kind of working through the concept and the idea? Like what were some of the things that you did to validate the idea and confirm that this was something that you and the rest of the team wanted to pursue?
I mean, for me, my validation was just kind of looking at Facebook groups, but we're still like we're always validating. And to do this, I did the surveys and I talked to a lot of my close friends. I didn't tell them about the startup. I actually, this is kind of funny, but I basically said that, for a class, I'm doing a survey and, I needed to fill this out. I did not say anything about a startup. I was just like, hey, what do you think about subleasing or whatever? Have you ever subletted your apartment? I asked a bunch of questions and I just said that it was for a class. Little did they know, little did they know a year later when I launched the company that, that it was for other reasons, not because of that, but it was with good intentions. I didn't want to be annoying and uh, I'm wondering if I answered your question. And so the beginning of Zublease, basically we just met up at the library like every week. And this was during the summer. So there was like no students on campus and stuff. And we just meet up weekly and just started writing down ideas, very napkin style, like nothing too crazy. We were just coming up with a bunch of ideas, like how this would work and stuff. We came up with like the first sketches on paper, which they looked absolutely terrible. And and looking back, I wish we were more, it's a whole learning progress, right? Like you learn as you go, and definitely you can't take for granted. Like you come in not knowing anything, and that's how it is. Definitely I would have done a lot of things differently though if I started out. Definitely I think a lot of people, I'm sure you can relate, but just fall into this whole like perfectionist like thing where it has to be perfect. And you know what? Honestly, like look at Airbnb and Facebook when they first started out, and they looked so bad when they started out. Like no one even remembers, and no one even remembers when they launched. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I got into that weird like, I don't know, mindset where I was like scared of like how people would judge it and things like that, and I would just focus so much on design when really, you should just get something out as quick as possible, test it, get users, reiterate, keep building.
Yeah. It's easier said than done, right? So you get into it and you're like, oh, well, I've got this huge vision for what we want, but all we can do is X, Y, and Z. And, and it's dealing with with when is it time to push something out that we can get feedback on. So I completely understand. And yeah, it's a great point that I think pretty much every entrepreneur goes through when they're building something new.
Like I'm sure you've faced that with Ostrich, right? It's your baby, right? Like, so when you're building it, you want it to be perfect and stuff. And,
Oh yeah, it was the same thing. We're going through that now. We've got a version that's live right now, but it's missing a lot of the key things that we want. So it's, hey, how much time do we spend promoting, getting feedback on what we currently have versus what we're building? And, you've got to weigh all that. And there isn't an easy answer, and there isn't always a right answer. Sometimes it's a little bit of both, or it's test and see what works. And if that doesn't work, then move on to the next thing. So it's trial and error for sure. Going back to your skateboarding analogy, it's you fall down a lot.
Yeah. It definitely I think too much about decisions sometimes. And honestly, the cool thing about a startup is that you can pivot. Big companies have a hard time pivoting, and if they mess up, like it usually ends up being pretty bad. But as a startup, it's like you fall down, no one's even going to see you. Like, so you can get up and just, okay, well, that didn't work. I'll just move on to the next thing. So
yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not like you're in the middle of the world stage and everyone's watching in the Super Bowl and you fall down and trip. It's like, you're just walking down the street and there might be the guy across the street that saw you fall, but that's about it. So Will, you didn't jump straight into Zublease full-time. After you graduated, you went and had a full-time job. Talk to me about that kind of decision. And you're a chemical engineer, right? That's what your degree's in. Technology, subletting apartments is a little bit outside of that. So kind of talk to me about your decision making in terms of how you have built and pursued Zublease.
Yeah, my friends that are still studying, or the ones that graduated, are like, what the hell? I'll start off with the degree thing first. So I ended up studying chemical engineering because I really liked chemistry and I was always like a math guy, and and I also needed to make some money. So I was like, okay, well, this is like best of both worlds, so I can make money and it's, I like what it is. But I'm just a very like open guy. Like I like learning about different things. So even when I was studying chemical engineering, during college, I picked up an electronics book and I just was messing around, tinkering with Arduinos, building circuits and stuff. And I also learned a bit of how to code with like Python. So I was just always like I never liked to stick at one thing, to be honest. And, so, when I started Zublease, like I knew like, yes, this is software. It's not really like my alley but I find an interest in it. I like software, I like learning new things. So, and, looking back, a lot of people didn't end up doing what they intended to study, right? So it's not uncommon for someone to be doing something that was not, what they studied. So, and then, yeah, and then so I got an engineering job. It wasn't chemical engineering. It was like more like manufacturing quality. Um, and I did it honestly because I got the opportunity. I was like, okay, whatever, like I'll do this full time and just keep doing Zublease part time. Eventually, I was just like, I'm not really like, that was like my first, like really me being thrown into corporate world. And it taught me a lot. Like, I don't regret doing it because I learned a lot about myself, and I just have a really hard time being in that environment. And, definitely I can see why I just naturally gravitate towards entrepreneurship. I hope things keep going well and, I keep staying in this route, but I eventually just, for my mental sake, like doing a full-time job and doing a startup at the same time is like, no one should be doing that. Like it's, yeah. So
there's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, so like, I think like after like half a year or something, I just left and, I just did Zublease full time. Thankfully, my parents were, and I didn't even tell my parents when I left, obviously, they're again, they just want you to be safe and, do your best. Like my parents were so proud that I graduated with an engineering degree and that I got a full-time job as an engineer. Like that's, I'm a first generation student. So it was a big deal for them, so it definitely wasn't an easy decision for me to leave because I knew that, this isn't going to be something that they really want. If I just went with what they wanted, I would just stayed at the job. But I mean, I left and, I told them about it. Thankfully, like they weren't. I know a lot of other parents are a lot more not supportive at all, but they eventually they ended up supporting me. They saw that this is what I really like doing. And, I'm even living with them right now just because I'm just saving money on rent. So, I enjoy, my parents are super cool. Like, they're a lot more fun than I am. Like, let me just put it like that. Like they're good people. And, so I'm really glad that they support me. I mean, yeah, they much prefer me doing a normal job and stuff, definitely sometimes when we're at the dinner table, they might be like, oh, there's this cool job that I saw. Like, I'm like, 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 but it is what it is. It could be a lot worse. I'm thankful for, having wonderful parents and just being in a, in a financial situation that I am in right now, so, my parents, when they were in Venezuela, they didn't have a lot, they were barely meeting rent, barely paying food. So, for them being here, it's like the dream for them. Right. So,
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in that situation. So for me, I'm much more privileged and fortunate. So, being able to start a company and not having to worry about debt and things like that, it's a privilege, and I'm fortunate. I try to take the opportunities as I can. So.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Will. And, recognizing, the privilege that you've got and everything that your parents sacrificed, and sounds like grandfather as well sacrificed in order for you to have the opportunity. And, obviously the way that your parents feel about what you're doing is obviously important. And it's great that they're giving you the opportunity to build the company and stay with them and save on rent, right?
Yeah. How did your parents feel when you decided to go about Ostrich?
So they were supportive. I think that's one thing that we can both have in common, is that my parents have always been supportive and confident in that I will be successful in whatever it is that I choose to undertake. So follow what it is that I'd like to do. I think that one of the things that maybe it's counterintuitive, you kind of mentioned it with the, chemical engineering, is that I knew going into college that whatever my degree was going to be, I was most likely not going to do. So like, I don't know if other people think that way, but that was something that I had, and I kind of learned from them because neither one of them used either of their degrees in in what they pursued outside after college, and even after, both being attorneys and neither one of them practicing attorneys because they both hate it. So it's like, you can do all this education, but that doesn't mean that you're going to end up, utilizing those skills necessarily. So go in there knowing that you want to like learn and grow, but who knows what that means from a professional or career perspective. So that's kind of like my my 2 cents on that.
That's awesome. Like, I did not go into college thinking, I thought I was gonna go into school, become a chemical engineer, graduate, and do chemical engineering stuff. And that's not how it ended up being. But again, maybe, because I guess you grew up in that place where you saw your parents, you already saw that. So, but that's awesome. It really does help having, like support. So that's cool. I can relate a lot with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was kind of weird as a kid too. Like I always was said that I didn't want a career. I'd rather have a job than a career. And my thought process around that was like, I don't want to be essentially in the corporate world and doing the same thing for 30 years. Cause I know that, similar to you, have a lot of interests, and that wouldn't suit my personality, where it's like, oh, I want to try this and this and this and this. And then, dive in once I know a little bit more about what I like and what I enjoy. So
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize that though when I was young. I mean, it was funny because like my friend was like, I end up having like a new hobby like every month. Like my best friend jokes about that, and looking back, I'm like, you know what, it makes sense. Like I just hate doing the same thing over and over again. So I relate heavily on that, and it's all coming together now. Now that I'm looking back, I'm like, it's all making sense.
yeah, exactly. Right. It's that Steve Jobs quote where, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards, and all those
Oh,
random
true.
things
Yeah.
start to make sense when you actually look back and you're like, oh, that's how I got to where I am today. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, it's I love that quote. It's so true though.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Will, in terms of like things that you've learned on your journey so far, like you mentioned there's things that you would do differently. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those things are, or advice for, someone else that might be interested in entrepreneurship, have an idea, that are kind of in the early stages?
Yeah. Well, I guess my biggest tip is just do it. Like, don't think about it. Like, I thought way too much about it. Like, don't think too much. Like, yes, do your research. And honestly, like, I'm more of like the rational type. I like to do my research before making decisions, and I try to, weigh in options and things. I like to like look at different things. And honestly, sometimes the best way to learn is just by doing it. I mean, if you do it, you're going to learn a lot more than you trying to do research on Google and doing, random tests and all these stuff. So my biggest advice is just do it. Like, don't think much about it and just go for it. Have a few friends that can help you, and go for it. If you don't know how to code, find someone that you very compatible with, that you can trust to help you code it. Just say it's don't call it a startup just yet. Just say it's a project. Just have fun with it. See how it goes. You know, then you can take it more serious as it grows. Um, in terms of like, I guess more like concrete mistakes, I think one mistake we ended up doing is just we paid for a freelancer to help us write the mobile application. And you know what, like looking back, it's I think people should really like avoid trying to outsource. I mean, the guy was great, like don't get me wrong, like it works and everything what he wrote, but it's just that in a startup you often reiterate a lot your product, like the first thing isn't what you intended to be, or you end up realizing that maybe this feature isn't it, or like someone doesn't understand this, and the freelancer is gone, like like you and he understands the code and you guys not too much. It's just better for you guys to build it. Luckily now, like there's a lot more resources, and it's a lot easier than before to build products, so
Yeah.
so definitely, try to figure your way, like even like, and everything I learned was through YouTube. So, well, like I guess another tip, YouTube, YouTube and Google. I'm a professional Googler and YouTube. I just search everything on YouTube, and it really helped. I learned how to code through YouTube. I learned how to set up my business through YouTube, and everything with finances that I didn't learn through school, which is a lot. YouTube is great. Yeah, shout out to YouTube.
There we go. Yeah, you can, there's so much information out there now that's pretty high quality stuff. So like the how to do stuff is almost easier. It's more like that kind of strategy. When you were saying, Will, of, just do it, you mentioned you do your research, but like what does that mean? Like, so great, like just go start it. Does that mean I start writing code? Do I start talking to customers? Like what do you mean by that if you're trying to get a little bit one layer deeper?
Yeah, I think the first thing you should do is just start talking to your potential users. Just start talking to them. You don't have to mention about the startup or anything. Just talk to them. You can do a survey if you want, but just start talking to your your target audience, and that way you really get into the shoes of that person. I mean, a lot of founders, I'm sure yourself, right, with Ostrich is they found these they start these companies already in that shoe step of like of the problem. Like I faced the problem of subleasing. So I had already a really good idea of the problem and how to solve it. So for me, I had a pretty good idea, but I just wanted to make sure even more. So doing surveys, and again, like I think my biggest tip is, just go talk to your users and then just build something. Don't overthink it. It doesn't have to look super pretty. Like honestly, just build something. Um, and then get it out and start testing with people. And again, like my mistake is that thinking when I launch, there's going to be a red carpet rolled out, and then everyone's going to look at my product and everyone's going to judge me or tell me it's great. And no one, like honestly, unfortunately, most people don't care, and that's kind of a good thing. And you can launch 100 times and people won't even know, like, which is good. I think Airbnb, like they were saying, like they launched like several times, they just got, yeah, we launched, who knows? Like, again, you don't remember the companies that launched, you just remember them after your friends told you about it. So, yeah, don't overthink it. Just talk to users, build something, get it out there. Definitely the lean startup method is pretty useful. Again, I think my problem is more me because I like to do a lot of research, and again, I'm more technical. I'm more rational, so I like to read up on things a lot and just make sure I'm making a good decision or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not the case, but generally that's what I do. So
yeah, understanding yourself and how you think, I think, is absolutely critical, because you're going to have your own set of biases or way of operating. And so being able to have co-founders or advisors or other people that are on your team in your network that can balance out your your strengths and weaknesses is absolutely critical.
like for example, like with Ostrich, I'm assuming your team is probably not like you, right? They're probably a little bit different in some way, right?
Yeah. My co-founder, Andrew, thinks differently than I do for sure about certain things. I'm like let's go do X, Y, and Z, and he's like, well, let's like
Yeah.
analyze things in a slightly different way. And he's really good at getting into some of the financial and technical things when it comes to like how the business should operate on the operation side. And I definitely think more from like, well, here's the vision. What if we connect X, Y, and Z? And thinking about kind of the bigger picture in terms of vision for future. So yeah, we balance each other out in that regard, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I totally relate. Like I'm like that, right? I like to come up with many ideas, and I'm more of like idea guy, and then execution is kind of hard for me. But then Senthren is also like, he's like a filter. Like Senthren's my co-founder, so he filters out all my ideas and like, this is kind of dumb. Like I wouldn't do this, or like we try to like reason out each one. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So Will, you mentioned you use this freelancer. I'm assuming you've funded this company yourself up to this point.
Yeah, we bootstrapped everything.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what is this next phase, right? You've just released a new version of the platform. Talk to me about what kind of the future is and what you're like, where you are in the process of building Zublease.
So I tried to reach out to a lot of other founders and get their input. The way I'm going to do this is to keep getting users, and we decided to change up our business model so that we're B2B2C, so that really we need to partner up with these property management companies. And so my goal is to start building that software for the property managers to use. Once I get that software, like, I need to start talking to these customers and really understand their pain points and start building like an MVP. And right when I think around then, like I need to eventually, yeah, fundraise. And, this definitely takes money to do. And I'm trying to see how much we can do just ourselves. So far we didn't need to raise money. And every founder I've talked to is like, don't raise money unless you need to. And I'm like, I don't really know what that means. And then, I was like, but so far, we've been making do without a lot of cash. So, and we have some ideas to make profit and things like that, like, well, just a little bit just to help us, keep running and stuff. But we're super frugal about everything. We try to DIY everything. For example, like the shirts, like I bought the shirts from a wholesale thing and I printed them myself. Like my dad showed me how to build this like wood frame thing with the and like you put the resin on there and with the photo emulsion, like it makes the image that you need. So like super, like I try to do everything, which is good and bad, right? Like, but it is what it is. I mean, so hopefully eventually I can start delegating more and whatnot. But so far with the three of us, we've been doing pretty good, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. And I think getting as far along as you can is absolutely the way to go, unless you've, built a bunch of startup companies and you have a bunch of capital where people are like, let's just throw money at this because we know we can, accelerate it on fire. I think you're going about it the right way. And that's sort of been our philosophy at Ostrich as well, as bootstrap. And how can we not raise money? And our technical advisor is always like, how can you not build software? So what are the things that we can do so we don't have to do that, because that costs money to build and time and energy. So how can we do all of these things, or what can we do? And then whatever we come up to where we have to build something, then we know it's actually important to build it from a software perspective, or, from a business perspective. If there's something where it's like, we can't, we actually do need to go build this, then we know we're building the right thing. So it's an interesting way to think about bootstrapping.
Yeah, definitely. When you're in that space, it's like you really cut out all the BS, right? Like you're not going to start building features that you don't need, right? Like you're like, this is what we need. This is what we're going to do. So that's the good part about it. It's also like, again, like, I grew up in a very like frugal household, cheap, everything's cheap. And, we try to build everything ourselves or not spend money when we don't need to, which kind of sucks sometimes, but it is what it is. And it'd be nice to be in a position to have fundraising, but also it's like, talking to these other founders, they're right. Like, if you don't need to raise money, don't do it. I don't know why, but it makes sense. But like every time you read the news, it's like this company raised millions of dollars. Like, look at them. Like that must mean they're really awesome. And I'm like, yeah, but it's,
yeah, they've just raised money. They haven't actually built anything yet. So
yeah,
it's the looking at the media and kind of the cult of the entrepreneur doesn't highlight necessarily the best path in entrepreneurship's best interest too, right? When you raise money, you give away control. If you got into essentially starting your company so that you wouldn't have a boss, I hate to break it to you, but as soon as you raise capital, you kind of have a boss, right? Like you've got investors, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Just understanding their incentives and the incentive structure, it just changes. So it's such an important decision that kind of gets glossed over, I think, in the regular entrepreneurial media. So
definitely, coming into this, I had no idea about any of this stuff. So learning about it, it's fun to learn. But yeah, definitely, I'm not one of those people where like I decided to do the startup to be my own boss. Like, no, like I don't really care. Like I think, like again, in life, you're always going to have to please people. Your stakeholders, your users, your boss, whatever, your investors, your parents. I mean, it's just part of life, right? So, but.
So then why did you get into this, Will? So you had this problem, but just because you had the problem doesn't mean that you should necessarily go out and start the business. What is it? What motivates you?
I love building things. I love creating things. I definitely would consider myself a creative person. I like creating new things, designing, like it's all really fun. And again, and also a part of the entrepreneurship, starting a business, that's also really fun. Like, me back in high school, making stickers, selling motorcycles, like I always had fun doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy the process of building this startup. And I enjoy helping the students too, because, this is definitely a problem. And it's really awesome to hear like my friends and, and other users tell me like, oh, this is really cool. I love this idea, like it's really helping me. I'm like, awesome, cool. So there's multiple reasons, like it's not like one thing. And also like it's a great way for me to just get out my creativity. I do many things. One day I'm like writing a blog, and one day I'm learning about all the financial stuff, and one day I'm building product, doing UX design or helping with that. So it's just never boring. Like there's just a lot going on, versus in a typical job, you're probably just going to do like a few things and just stick to that, and that was like the hardest part for me to do. Like I hated doing that. Like once I learned it, I'm like, I have to keep doing this like and over and over and over again. Like, come on, like that sucks. So
So would you say that's one of the best parts of entrepreneurship then, is the ability to learn and do all these different things and no day is the same?
yeah, I guess like now we're talking through this, like you're helping me. Like, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts about it. What about you? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think it's creating something out of nothing. So before there was nothing that existed and you were actually creating value, and
There's something beautiful about it.
yeah, taking something that just exists in your mind from an idea, or and turning it into something that's real and tangible. I think there's something that's really just satisfying about that.
It's kind of like like an artist, or like an art. Like they're coming before it's just a canvas, but afterwards they created something new out of it. Um,
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
there's definitely
So,
something beautiful about that, and interesting. I definitely enjoy that part too.
yeah.
It yeah.
Well, in terms of your vision for Sublease, like what does that look like? What does your vision for Sublease look like? And how do you define success today?
For success for me, like, it's I think, definitely the hedonic treadmill is very real. Like you become successful on one thing, then there's the next thing. And it's like, you're not successful until you rule the world. And it's like, success for me is just doing what I love and like, just trying to be a good friend, family member, and, building something that people use. So like, hopefully Zublease, takes off and, helps a lot of people, and, but even if I can just help a few students sublet, that's success for me, honestly. We still have a lot of work to do, and, it's never ending. Like it's just, there's always going to be something new. And in terms of like, definitely I eventually want to fundraise, build a bigger team, network and keep building partnerships with property management, helping more students. There's a lot. But that's just, it's kind of cheesy, but that's just my definition of success. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's your definition. Don't don't call it cheesy. It's yours,
Yeah.
So that's the important part, is that you've thought about that.
What about you? What do you think about success?
Yeah. So from a personal perspective, which also translates to a professional, is I think the relationships with people are really important, whether it's customer, employees, co-founders, investors, potential partners, or even competitors. Like if I can if I can help other people, and when someone either sees my name pop up on their phone for a phone call or an email or whatever it is, and their immediate reaction is like some sort of like joy or positive emotion, then I think I've done something that has impacted their lives in a positive way. And so I know that's kind of an interesting thing, but I think that like that is really powerful, and being able to choose where you spend your time. So for me, that's Ostrich, helping people with their financial well-being and, improve their lives. Cause to me, finance is one of those things that underlies everything, whether we realize it or not, right? Like whatever your life goals are, there's probably some amount of money that will either help you achieve them or enable you to live that life. So if you just wanted to skateboard all day and that's all you wanted to do, like you'd need to be able to have a place to live and like buy
Yeah.
new shoes when you wore down the soles on your, like there's certain things that you need. And I think that if we can help people get an understanding of that and tying finance back to those things that are actually important, that's success. So that's kind of how I think about it, is the relationships and interactions that I'm having with everyone that kind of tie back to um, just helping people live better lives.
Finances is a big part of our lives, whether we like it or not. And again, I try to see in a positive light, because it's a tool. Like money is a tool, it's a resource. You use it to build companies, you use it to help other people. Some people use it for other things that, it is what it is. But, and I think you were talking about, I'm trying to remember, but what was that first point you make? I totally forgot.
About the relationships with people
Oh
and
yeah.
like,
So you definitely influenced me because like listening to your podcast, and then also just I think when we first started messaging each other, you definitely brought joy to my life. So just listening to other entrepreneurs being on your podcast, it's very inspiring. It makes me feel good. So you're definitely doing that.
well, I appreciate that, Will, and I'm excited to see what you're building at Zublease.
Thanks,
So
man.
you kind of alluded to your relationship with money just right there, that you see it as a tool. What would you say is the best investment that you've made?
Okay. Well, I'll give both, like, not like, okay. So in terms of like no money, like just in terms of time, investment can also be time. Time is also, money. But like that would be for me, just being part of this organization in college. It's called the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. A lot of people there weren't, not just Hispanics, like it was just open to everyone. But it was a really cool club because, it taught me, I made a lot of friends who became my co-founders later on. And it taught me a lot of leadership skills, and how I run my company today is actually like very similar to how the organization is run. So, we all take our own initiatives. We're all very collaborative. We try to help as much as we can. I think what's really interesting about organizations is that you have to motivate people without money because, it's nonprofit, and that's really hard to do. Most of your boss is your boss because, money, right? So now in terms of like investments, like money, I just recently started investing. So like, I can't really say like what is my best investment. I think right now just investing into like Airbnb, for example, I'm really happy about investing with them just because I really believe in their company. When I heard their story and, when they first started out to where they are today, it's super inspiring. So for me, like I'm more than happy to like invest in that company just because I believe in it a lot.
Yeah, no, I like the example of what you learned, through kind of running a good organization and then getting into obviously, Airbnb and what you admire about them. You in your bio had mentioned that you were a proud Hispanic, entrepreneur. Can you talk a little bit about that and like how that identity and how that kind of motivates you and how you view that as part of who you are and kind of how you operate?
So being Hispanic, like the work culture is, there a lot of Hispanic people I know, they work a lot, like, and it is what it is. Like they come from a place where that is like ingrained into them, they just don't have especially the ones that live here, right? So, they just don't have the same opportunities that a lot of other people do. So they just have to work a lot harder to get to where they need to be. And definitely, I I'm still nonetheless fortunate where I am at, but definitely that mindset has been somewhat ingrained to my, my brain with my parents and everything. Like my parents worked a lot to get where they were today. So definitely that hustler mentality is just part of me today. And I try to take things, try not to take them for granted. I think that's also just my friend group was so like always very diverse, and I have like all kinds of friends, and I love them all. I don't think about that, when I'm hanging out with
Sure.
them or not, but definitely it's good. I think diversity really helps in building companies and stuff. It just adds a lot of openness, adds a lot of, new ideas to the table and stuff. So when I was in my organization, the part that I ran was helping K through 12 students, and a lot of them
Okay.
were minorities. So, seeing them is, and, recruiting them into the organization, a lot of them are not inspired. They don't, they're like, no, my parents told me that I can't go to college because it's too expensive, or I can't do this because of this. And it sucks. And, unfortunately, so I tried hopefully becoming like somewhat of a role model and telling, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can go to college. Yes, you can start a company. Like, you just have to tell yourself yes, and surround yourself with the right people that will help you. People will help you. You just have to put yourself there. So hopefully I can inspire a few people to, take risks and, take challenges.
Absolutely. I think so. You inspire me to go out there and work harder and make things happen. So I'm certain that will.
Awesome.
On the flip side of the investment coin, what would you say is the worst, dumbest money mistake that you've made?
Like that, this was like with GameStop, like that was so recent. I bought into the hype train thing. I mean, I kind of knew like when I was like, okay, I feel like I'm probably gambling at this point. Like it's pretty, it is what it is. Like I try to learn from my mistakes. Thankfully, like I didn't hurt myself. So, like I knew like, I was like, okay, whatever I put in, I have to be okay with losing it. So that's what I did. And I didn't lose that much money, but still it's like, it sucks. I knew a lot of people that got really hurt from it. I'm like, wow, like that's terrible, but again, learning lessons, don't buy into FOMO. It's real. Now it's with Dogecoin. Hopefully it keeps going up, because I do have some friends invested in that, but you can't tell. It's all speculation, right? Like versus value investing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, Will, this has been a lot of fun. I want to leave you with the last word. So if there's anything that you want to share just in general about entrepreneurship or advice that you can give other people, and then also please let the audience know how they can connect with you through Zublease and support what you're building.
Again, like I'm not going to overcomplicate it. Just do it. If you have something you want to do, just do it. Even if it's like 30 minutes a day, you want to be an artist, like start painting. If you want to start a company, start selling something, like don't overthink it. Just do it. It really is that simple. But, and in terms of Zublease, we have an Instagram account, we have a website, you can just zublease.com, follow us on our Instagram. We have YouTube, TikTok, we have everything, Pinterest. And if you want to reach out to me personally, you just want to say hi or you have questions, feel free to do that. I'm more than happy to answer. I usually answer to my Instagram a lot, so we can try to link that as well. But yep.
Awesome.
And thank you very much for letting me be on here. This is super fun. I had a really good time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good conversation, and I appreciate you sitting down and sharing your story and helping other entrepreneurs that are thinking through some of these same things that you already done and already executed on. So
yeah, thank you. I hope Ostrich keeps going well, and Silicon Alley. So it was a pleasure being on here. Thank you very much.
That's it for today's episode of the Silicon Alley podcast. If you haven't already, go ahead and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when episodes air every week. And please share this episode with someone that you think would get value. It's the only way that the community grows and others hear these incredible stories from entrepreneurs just like Will. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Have a very profitable day.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying I'll never